Hey, Greg here for Protophile. Got Scott behind the camera. We're going to do an interesting video called Understanding the Table. And this is a basic video about how to understand the relationship between models on the table, what they can see, and how that impacts what they can do in a very basic sense for new players. So we're going to talk about models, how to draw line of sight and intervening models, volume and targeting, terrain and how it affects line of sight, and completely within versus within. So we're going to go down to the tabletop and I'm going to explain the first couple of concepts. Oh, you're already down there? Okay, awesome. Okay, so when you're trying to decide if a model has line of sight to another model, a model can see basically anywhere out of its base, basically. A lot of times you're restricted from being the front arc if you want to charge or something like that. But determine, or to shoot. So from its front arc, anywhere on its base, if you can draw like a razor thin line to any other portion of another model's base, that model is considered to have line of sight. So before we get terribly into this, I'm going to make a brief note about terrain. And before you play a game, you should always discuss the terrain on the table with your opponent so that you know what it is and how it's going to affect the game. So in this case, my opponent and I have decided that this is a trench. There's very specific rules for trench, but a trench does not block line of sight. This is a forest. It does block line of sight. This is a hill. It does not block line of sight. This is a wall. It does not block line of sight. And this is an obstruction, or a house. And it does block line of sight, and it has a limit on volume, and I'll show you that in a second. So if I'm trying to see if GetRx can see any of these models, I'm going to get out this awesome laser from Broken Edge Games. It's amazing. So as you can see, I can draw a line from anywhere on GetRx's base to anywhere on the Stormclad's base, so he can totally see that. This one's a little more dicey because we got the forest here, and the laser cannot be anywhere on the forest. So if I go to the closest edge of GetRx's base to the closest edge of the Storm or the Ironclad's base, it goes to the forest. So GetRx does not have line of sight to the Ironclad. Same thing with Haley. The forest is completely in the way, so he does not have line of sight to Haley. If we go to the bird, the Skarsfeld Griffin over here, it does have line of sight to the Ironclad. It also has an ability which allows it to ignore forests, but we're just assuming that it does not have that ability for now. And you can see that if I try to draw a line of sight to Haley with the Skarsfeld, the house is in the way, he cannot see her currently. The Moonhound can see Haley because there's a portion of her base sticking out behind the wall, and this part over here can draw a line to there. So it does have line of sight, even though she will probably get cover for any ranged attacks that are involved. And same thing with Tanith. She does have line of sight to Haley, but it is partially obscured by the obstruction or the obstacle, and there may be a defensive benefit. Tanith does not have line of sight to the Ironclad, and even though the Stormclad is on the hill, the forest does block line of sight to it, so Tanith does not have line of sight to that. Line of sight, we're going to cover line of sight and, intervening models. So, the way it works is that models of the same base size block line of sight to other models of the same or smaller base size. So that means that small base models, like in this instance, if Haley was crazy enough to be up here behind these trenchers, the trenchers would block line of sight to Haley because there are no gaps in between them that I can draw a line of sight. If there was a small gap, like so, I could draw a line between Tanith's base and Haley's base. She does have line of sight to Haley. But if they're like that, they block line of sight. I can't draw a line through there. Same thing with, I don't know, here's some medium base, and what happened to that Tinkerer? Okay, so, but if this wasn't Haley and say it was Thorn, this medium base here, the small bases do not block line of sight to Thorn because they are smaller. They are not equal or larger. So GetRx can see over the trenchers to Thorn. If you want to block line of sight to Thorn, you would need to have large bases in the way to obstruct it. So once again, I can't draw an uninterrupted line between GetRx's base and Thorn because of the larger bases that are in the way. So Getorix does not have line of sight to Thorn. Likewise, if the Stormclad is behind a couple of medium bases, the medium bases are smaller than the large base that the Stormclad is on, so you can draw line of sight through the medium bases to the large base. So once again, intervening models always have to be same size or larger. Hills are a complicated terrain feature when it comes to line of sight. We're going to do a separate video on them, but in a general sense, if a model is on a hill, let's get somebody with a gun, because it's a little beneficial if you have guns. A model that is on a hill ignores other models between it and its target that it's trying to draw a line of sight, as long as that model, batteries, as long as that model is not 1 inch away from the target. So say in this case, if this guy was trying to shoot Tanith, and the Moonhound was more than 1 inch away from Tanith, he would ignore the Moonhound for line of sight. If the Moonhound was within 1 inch, it would block line of sight. Otherwise, like I said, it can draw a line of sight much further, ignores friendly and enemy bases that are not within 1 inch of the target. So, like I said, it's complicated. We'll cover that in a separate video, but that's the gist of it. Anyways, we'll talk about the obstruction over here. On a lot of widgets that you get, these are Muson Mini widgets. On the side of them, you'll see there's markings. It says S, M, and L, and that is for use for volume, for obstructions, to see how tall they are in relation to other models. So the S means that a small base, regardless of what the actual model's volume is, if you put it beside, that is what it is represented in game terms. So if you look at this little house that's here, it is taller than the S, so it will block line of sight to small base models. I didn't pick the best one, but okay. And the M is for medium base models, so it's also tall enough it will block for medium bases. And if the house was just a little smaller and a little wider, it would be below the L, and it wouldn't block line of sight to large base. But currently, it looks like it's big enough that it will. And once again, great idea to talk with your opponent prior to the game to ascertain what the volume of the terrain features are and how that relates to line of sight on the tabletop. All right, now we'll talk really briefly about completely within and versus within, because this is important for a bunch of abilities, and it's important for your understanding of how things function on the tabletop. And basically, the way that works is for a model to be completely within, it has to be completely within. So say Haley is going to TK this Stormclad. The Stormclad has to be placed from its current position completely within 2 inches. So it can only go 2 inches. It cannot go like that. I can do this like this so you can actually see better. So this is completely within 2 inches, right? So much a shorter distance. This is within 2 inches. So for completely within, the model's base must be completely within the distance of relation, whereas within is just the microest portion of the base must be within. So when you're reading your cards, make sure you do that. And that'll help you understand the tabletop as well. All right, so that is, in a general sense, understanding the table and the relationship between the models and the terrain features that are on them. Like I said, the most important thing is to discuss the table with your opponent so that you both have a mutual understanding of how the table is laid out and what that means to your game. So, good luck.